Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast titled When Wildfire Comes. My name is Dr. Christopher Potter, and I'm a wildfire scientist with over 30 years of experience working for NASA, our country's space agency, and also with local communities impacted by wildland fires throughout the state of California and the western United States. I've studied practically every wildfire that has burned on the urban interface over the last 10 years using satellite imagery and ground measurements for practically all the most destructive fires in the western US. And I've published dozens of science papers on these events in the literature. I myself also live in a high risk fire zone in Northern California, so I've seen it up close, what fire can do to a community and the preparedness we have to have for future fires. So today we're going to hear from our invited guest about their close encounter with a major wildland fire that occurred over the past decade. This is not a breaking news report, really. It's another case study episode in this podcast series during which our guest recounts their reactions, their emotions, their firsthand observations of a wildfire approaching and, in fact, burning their town or community, doing a tremendous amount of damage to the structures there and to the lives of the people there. But I also want to get to the lessons learned from having gone through such a tragic event, because there are many lessons out there for us to take into the future. So today, I'm very pleased and honored to welcome our special guest, Captain Matt Tognozzi, who is a captain with the Santa Rosa Fire Department. Santa Rosa is the biggest town in Sonoma County, isn't that right, Captain?
Yeah, it's the county seat. It has a population of about 200,000 people, and it's situated almost directly in the middle of Sonoma County, right along the 101 corridor.
Yeah, it's a well-known town in Northern California. I mean, we sort of consider it part of the Bay Area, the North Bay Area, but it's just on the northern edge. So today, myself and Captain Tognazzi will be talking about the Tubbs fire. And the Tubbs fire was an event that took place in 2017. It was one of the biggest wildfires of that very large wildfire season of 2017. It started near Tubbs Lane in the northern rural part of Napa County near the town of Calistoga. And that started on October 8th, 2017. And within a few hours, certainly within a day, it had destroyed over 5,000 structures, half of which were homes in the city of Santa Rosa. Santa Rosa's economic loss has been pegged at least $1.2 billion in those days' money, and it's going up all the time as people try to rebuild. And 5% of the city's housing stock was destroyed during the Tubbs fire. So a very, very unusual and tragic event. Overall, by the time it was contained on October 31st, 2017, the fire was estimated to have burned over 36,000 acres. And most tragically, at more than 20 people were believed to have been killed in Sonoma County by the fire. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Tognozzi and ask him if you could just tell your listeners first a little bit about who you are and about your fire station, and then what are your feelings today about what you experienced on those first few days of the Tubbs fire?
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me here today, Dr. Potter. So like you've already mentioned, my name is Matt Tognozzi. I'm a captain with the Santa Rosa Fire Department. My experience, I have about 23 years in the fire service, all of it being here in Sonoma County. In addition to that, and kind of how we got connected, I'm also the president of the Sonoma County Professional Firefighters. The Santa Rosa Fire Department, so like I'd said, has a population that they serve of about 200,000 people. They do that with 11 engine companies, 2 truck companies, 2 battalion chiefs, and 2 squads. So they have almost 50 people on every single day. It's a career fire department, so they don't have any auxiliary staff to help support them during major incidents or emergencies. All of it is done with the daily staff that's on duty. Kind of a bigger picture in Sonoma County, there's over 20 fire departments in total in Sonoma County that kind of help support each other through the mutual aid system. And so during a big incident like the Tubbs fire, it took all of us to kind of help support each other. This wasn't something that the Santa Rosa Fire Department did on their own. As far as my feelings, it's been a long time. I mean, 8 years since the Tubbs fire had occurred. And so kind of preparing for this interview and reading kind of the statistical data again, and kind of going through my own memories, it was humbling. It was a period of time, like, during the incident itself, that I went through. So I'd been to a lot of large scale fires throughout my career leading up to this. And one of the things I distinctly remember when looking back on this fire was constantly having to remind myself that I was in my own community. I kept forgetting that at points in time, I was less than a mile away from my own house, that my wife and kids were at home. And so it was very hard to, at the time, associate in my mind that this was happening to my community. And that was a very bizarre feeling and a very bizarre experience to go through. And kind of looking back on it now, it is sad, the amount of people that perished in that fire, the amount of homes that were lost, the amount of lives that were, kind of uprooted because of this fire. The city of Santa Rosa is still to this day dealing with rebuilding after the Tubbs fire. You could drive through the Coffee Park neighborhoods or Fountain Grove and still see vacant lots or homes under construction. And that's 8 years after that fire had burned.
Yeah, wow. It takes a long time,
Yeah.
mentally and financially to recover when you
Yeah.
get that kind of extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next, I wondered if you could please take maybe 10, even 15 minutes if you like, and could you start like on the night of that October? It was like October 8th, right, when the fire
Yeah.
started late at night. What was it like? What was the weather like? And can you recount the next day's events? Which were
Totally.
when most of the damage happened in that night, right, in the dark and the
Yeah.
early morning hours of the next day.
Yeah. So on the day of October 8th, 2017, I was working as a firefighter, and I was on our Engine 8 situated in Roseland, which is on the south end of Santa Rosa. On that day itself, I distinctly remember it being, a red flag day, and it being very warm, and kind of, us even talking about on the engine company, that we were going to have a busy day. Did I think that there was going to be a fire that burned down, 5,000 structures? Absolutely not. But during the majority of the day, we had a typical day. Ran typical calls, but as the evening started to come, so in my memory, it was starting to become kind of sunset. It started to get windy, and we started to get dispatched to a lot of very small fires in our part of Santa Rosa. Some of them were from like encampment fires, people's barbecues that were getting out of control. And that itself struck me as bizarre at the time, because it's very out of the ordinary that we would just get that volume of fire calls
Sure.
in any typical day, right? At some point during the course of this, it was evening, it was dark at this point. We got sent to a fire that was burning along Highway 101 north of the city of Santa Rosa. It's off of a road called Shiloh Road. And it was, I don't know, maybe a few acres, nothing that was of any significance. And it was super, super clear that night. I remember if it wasn't a full moon, it was almost a full moon. Like the moon lit up everything. It was so easy to see outside. And so we were there working at that grass fire. There was probably, I don't know, 5, 6 other fire engines there with us. And I distinctly remember at one point it getting like really dark. and trying to figure out what happened to the moon.
Mm.
Shiloh Road, kind of where we were at, looks over the mountains, the Mayacamas Mountains that kind of separate Sonoma County from Napa County. And I remember kind of trying to look around for where the moon was at and seeing a huge column of smoke that was coming up. Um, and to me, it was coming up from the Napa County side. And kind of the initial feeling from what I remember was, it's horrible. There's a huge fire burning over in Napa County, but it's not going to affect us. Maybe my involvement in it is going to be being sent over to Napa County to help with that fire.
Right.
We kind of continued working there along Highway 101. And at this point, it's probably getting close to like 10 o'clock at night ish. And we started getting reports that the fire was burning up over the hills coming towards Santa Rosa. And our group of engines with the chief officer that was with us kind of independently formed what we would call a strike team, or a group of fire engines that would be called to a large fire. And we drove into the Larkfield area. The major road that kind of connects Napa and Sonoma counties there is Mark West Springs Road.
Mm.
And I remember us trying to drive up Mark West Springs Road. And we got maybe, I don't know, a mile up the road, just where it started getting out of the valley floor and climbing up into the mountains. And there was fire everywhere. It was impossible for us to continue up the road any farther.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like, I think that was the first point in time where that kind of sinking feeling in your gut of like, oh, this is really, really bad right now. So we had turned around, and they made the choice to bump down to the Fountain Grove area of Santa Rosa. There was reports that the fire was impacting the city of Santa Rosa there. Just to kind of give the listeners an idea, Fountain Grove is situated on a mountainside. It overlooks the city of Santa Rosa. It's generally larger homes on bigger plots of land, anywhere from, say, a quarter to half acre in size. But they're very large homes. In the lower part of Fountain Grove, it's very commercial. There were medical offices, care homes, things like that. And so we kind of made our way up into Fountain Grove. And I remember like trying to go into streets everywhere in Fountain Grove and just being cut off by fire and not being able to kind of get off of the main thoroughfare of Fountain Grove that runs through there. And we eventually made our way to a road called Round Barn Boulevard. Round Barn is on the lower part of Fountain Grove and is heavily commercial, buildings, care homes, medical office buildings, things like that. And we came upon a care facility that was there. It was at, if I remember correctly, like 3585 Round Barn Boulevard. And it's a large, like 3-story care facility. And the thing that absolutely shocked me is there was probably maybe 20 elderly people out in the middle of the road trying to flee the care facility. At this point,
it was engulfed at that point.
No, there was fire burning around it, but the building itself was still intact. And that in itself was surprising, that it was still standing and that there wasn't, it wasn't actively burning. At this point, like the strike team, that group of engines we were with, kind of broke apart and started picking buildings along this Round Barn to try to help protect them. And so we ourselves, us and another fire engine that was with us, went to protect this care facility. And so we had gotten all the elderly folks that were there back into the building, because that was ultimately the safest spot for them at that time. And there's a technique that we do when we protect homes, and it's called bump and run. And we kind of back a fire engine up to someone's home. We deploy a couple 100-foot hose lays around the outside of the home, and we help bump the fire around the facility or around the house, right? In this case, where we would normally do that with one 100-foot length of hose, it took like 700 feet of hose to get to the back of this care facility. That's just how big it was.
Wow.
We were successful in keeping the fire from getting into it, successful in preventing it from burning down, from anyone getting hurt. but the vantage point that I had from where we were at, we watched the fire kind of burn around this care facility, cross Highway 101, and then continue on and burn into the Coffee Park neighborhood, which is where a majority of the homes did burn down. And
Mhm.
so that was, it was sad, and it kind of left you with this feeling of always wanting to do more and to go and help elsewhere. Um, Ultimately, there at that care facility, we got city buses in. We loaded them up with the folks that were there and shipped them out to an evacuation area. Um, that brought us up close to morning time, and I forget the exact wind speeds, but wind speeds were very fast, like in the 60-mile-an-hour range. They were fast enough. Like I remember fire engines getting their doors damaged. They were ripping the doors and slamming them up against the fire engines. It was windier than I've ever seen it here in Sonoma County. Um,
Ever,
and
yeah, ever,
yeah,
so unprecedentedly
it was
high
crazy.
wind conditions, and they were coming from the direction, unfortunately, where the fire had started,
Yeah. And
which was that was how many miles away, approximately 10, 12 miles away.
yeah, I would say probably 10, at least 10 miles away. I mean, if you were to drive from where we were at that point to Tubbs Lane, I mean, it would take you 20 minutes of driving at least to get there. Um, it was very far, and it burnt that in 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It moved from Tubbs Lane, burning into the city of Santa Rosa.
Hmm. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And how was it being carried? What I mean, could you see how it was being carried both into the neighborhoods and then through the neighborhoods?
Prevented it from coming into the city of Santa Rosa, right? And I do remember after the fire people asking that question of how to prevent it from coming in. And Mother Nature is, impossible to deal with sometimes. But going forward, so as morning time came, we started to get a lot of fire engines throughout the state coming in and helping. But this fire was huge at this point, and it got so big so quickly that it still felt like we were kind of on our own to some degree, right? Um, After a fire burns through an area, there's that initial flame front that'll burn homes down. But once it moves through, one of the biggest causes of homes burning down after the fact are just small smoldering embers that land in people's gutters or underneath their decks. And unchecked, those will burn houses down. And so we kind of transitioned into this mode of what I would call like fire front following and kind of checking areas that had already been burned to preserve the homes that were still standing. Um, if my memory serves me, as daytime came, the wind started to calm down. And that's the only reason the fire stopped burning homes in Coffee Park. If it hadn't, it would have continued on um, its destructive path. There was
Hmm.
nothing we could have done to stop it. Um, but
Right.
our that next day, we focused heavily on trying to salvage homes, on to try to save what was left standing, salvage people's belongings. And it was it was both mentally and physically just exhausting witnessing your community be devastated by fire, and realizing just how many people were impacted by it, realizing in the one evening, tens of thousands of people were having to figure out their lives from scratch again. They had nowhere
Right.
to live, just uprooted everything. Um, and so that was very taxing. It was, it drove all of us, I think, to try to save as much as we could. But when you got to those homes that just weren't salvageable, um, or that you fought, for an hour trying to save and you failed, um, that hurt. It hurt a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's what you're trained to do. And the fire is just too much, too
yeah.
many structures on fire at once, I'm sure. Could you tell as you're watching the coffee park um, areas go up, uh, whether um, there was a lot of radiant heat that was moving from the fire from one home to the other, or was it, like you said, mostly the cause of small embers getting cast from one to the other, and maybe would they get up into the vents, or would they ignite vegetation around the home, the
From
next
where
home?
Yeah, no, totally. From where I was at, like that first night, um, it, I mean, to me, it seemed like it was the radiant heat that was catching just one building after another on fire. From where I was at, I distinctly remember there was like a large shopping center right along Highway 101,
Mhm.
and just kind of paint the picture, like Highway 101 is, 6 lanes of traffic total, so three going southbound, three going northbound, that fire had to cross to go from the Fountain Grove area to kind of get into the Coffee Park area.
Mhm.
Um, and so the fire traveled a huge distance without any fuel to carry it there, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Along Highway 101 there, it's very commercial. And what I saw from that care facility was like a big shopping center. I believe it was a Walmart and another kind of adjoining strip mall that was there that had, small businesses that was completely on fire. Um, and that, I think, kind of initial evening was just, a combination of embers and whatnot, but the wind was just so powerful and it had pushed all that radiant heat down on its side, the flames down on its side, and it easily just caught the next building on fire and the next building on fire. Especially in the Coffee Park neighborhood, it's a typical track home neighborhood. Houses are separated by maybe 20 feet of space, 30 feet of space.
Yeah.
And so a fire easily carries from one building to the next, um, especially when you put wind on it. And so that's why I
Yeah.
say it was impossible to stop it. The wind is what dictated that fire stopping.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. It was so unusual, I'm sure, to to see that happening, and then realizing, the resources to combat something like that just aren't available anywhere nearby. Maybe anywhere
Yeah.
in the state. If you had every firefighter in the state out there, you couldn't have stopped it, because I assume that um, the resources that were on site at the time were perfectly capable of handling a few homes, but not tens of homes being on fire at one time, and fighting those fires actively.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. There's no way that you could have thrown, like you said, every single firefighter in the state of California at that. And, there's just no stopping it. It would be comparing it to, humans trying to stop a tornado or a hurricane. It's just impossible. Mother
Mm-hmm.
Nature was in charge at that point, and there was nothing that we could do to stop that fire moving. Um, our
Yeah.
goal was to try to get as many people out of its way as possible, and then come back through and save what was left.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, certainly the greatest losses and most tragic losses were in the city of Santa Rosa. When you were driving more in the rural areas before that, earlier in the evening and the night, could you also see more rural areas and structures starting to burn?
Totally. The So that initial road we tried to go up, Mark West Springs Road, that is a very, very rural part of the county. It's a roadway that runs up a canyon that ultimately pops out at the top of the hill on a road called Calistoga Road, and that connects Napa and Sonoma counties.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very rural, um, heavily forested. Uh, it was, I mean, just completely decimated. Every single home was gone. The entire forest was burnt and left looking like matchsticks. Um, it was, just as impacted as the Fountain Grove and the Coffee Park areas. It's just that, homes were more spread out. Um, and what you had burning there was, the typical crown fire burning through, stands of trees and catching the
Yeah.
homes fires that went along.
So there were some pretty large trees up there, not just shrubs.
Very, yeah, it's a mixture of, redwood and Doug fir and it's more of what you would consider your typical like forest, right? It's not oak woodlands up there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they're very, tightly packed. After the fire, much of those hillsides were left bare, except for the trunks of the trees, still standing, looking, like I said, kind of like matchsticks, just stuck in the ground, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So you within a couple hours or less, you had a perfectly healthy forest on those ridges, and then instead of a fire starting on the ground like a campfire might start and get out of control, you had a crown fire going.
yeah,
Is that right?
yeah, where it had climbed up into the canopy of the tree, so it was no longer a surface, fire burning through grass or brush. It had gotten up into the canopies of the trees and was moving, above the ground and along those tree canopies
Mm-hmm.
until it hit ultimately, the city of Santa Rosa, the highway, things like that. Um, and from there, embers and ultimately its radiant heat, projected it
Mm-hmm.
across to the other buildings, and then it became building to building ignitions.
Yes. And I heard you say before that you were spared by relatively calm conditions with sunrise. Was it
Yeah.
shortly after sunrise that the wind died down?
Yeah, from what I remember, it calm down once the sun had kind of came up. Um, I remember kind of having that feeling of like, finally, this is over, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can get a handle on this. And that was also met with daylight being able to see what had actually happened. Um, living here and knowing exactly what these neighborhoods looked like, it looked like a foreign landscape after the fact, unrecognizable, without homes being there and just the amount of devastation.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Sure.
and so it was mixed feelings, right? With the wind dying down and that kind of feeling of like this is all done, but then realizing how much damage was done and how much more, we needed to do to help save people's belongings and to really try to do as much good as we could.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of that, can you single out a one or two or three people who were particularly heroic that day, or did the heroic actions that actually save structures or lives?
The I'm trying to think, I would say in general, the emergency responders that were there, leading up to this, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more if you would like me to, but Sonoma County was completely unprepared for this. This was not something as a firefighter here that we really talked about, of a fire burning in this quickly into our community. Um, but we as a 911 system or a first responder system, um, came together and did the best we could. Um,
Of course.
and I remember how well the police department worked with the fire department in evacuating people. I mean, I remember police cars being burnt to the ground along Fountain Grove Parkway, running up over the hill with cops trying to save as many people as they could and losing their patrol cars. Um,
Hmm.
and so, for me, I would say the system being impacted by an event that really they were never truly ready for, um, were
Yeah,
heroic in responding to it.
that's great. That's
Uh,
one silver lining
yeah,
that people can
yeah,
keep their cool, so to speak, under that situation, and just do the job they were trained to do.
yeah,
Hmm. That's amazing. Um, well, I guess we maybe come to the point where we could talk a little bit about what lessons
totally.
we could take away from this. I know that there are a lot of communities that are doing they're now very proactive in Sonoma, in Napa, in around the Bay Area, even farther south in California that are trying to control their fuels or reduce their fuels.
Yeah,
Um, Do you think that would have helped in this case?
Would it have stopped it? Um, the fire was going to burn where the fire burned, but people
Hmm.
being better prepared, I think, to evacuate the area. And so to me, obviously there were 22 people that perished in the Tubbs fire. If we could have gotten that down to zero, that is where, us as emergency responders, we were impactful that evening. We were not, like I said, stopping that fire from burning from house to house. And this is my personal opinion. I'm sure there could be people that refute this, but um, I don't care how perfectly prepared a piece of property was. The fire was going to burn where the fire wanted to burn. The wind was pushing it to where it was going to push it to. Um, but people, the community being better prepared to evacuate, um,
Hmm.
saving lives, I think is where the lesson learned that we took from this incident. And like you said, 100%. We, since the Tubbs fire, have a vegetation management program. We have crews that go around and perform vegetation management projects, and those are very impactful on on the smaller fires or on the more typical red flag events where you get offshore flows, that aren't
Hmm.
hurricane force winds, right? Um,
Right.
and so that work is very impactful and it does have its place. Obviously, we do that, but if we could get the loss of life down to zero, I mean, I wish no one perished in that fire. And that would be typical of every single wildland fire that's happened, before it and since it. No one
Yeah.
should be dying in these.
Yeah. Do you think having some sort of siren system would have helped?
It could have, that was a huge topic of discussion right after the Tubbs fire,
Hmm.
similar to what like a tsunami warning system or a
Right.
tornado warning system would be. Um, so here locally, we implemented a radio, like a siren system that is on every single police vehicle.
Mm.
And it's distinctly different than the siren that they would typically use traveling around a community every single day. And is designed that when they drive through community blaring that siren, that it's alerting people to evacuate the area. We have, definitely utilized technology better than it was utilized before, pushing out app-based alerts like through Nixle or SOCO public safety alerts.
Hmm.
And then as a community, I think people are just far more in tune to what is happening around them in their community through apps like Watch Duty or forums like on Facebook chat groups. And so people are just far more in the know what's happening and better preparing themselves for what is occurring in their vicinity.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So these sirens are used when a fire has been detected and there's a need. You're within a certain distance that evacuation is the only prudent thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah,
all
they do.
the fire's already started at that point when the
Yes.
sirens are gone off, right?
Yes. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, in this case, you wonder if more sensors, a network of sensors that would tell us when the wind speed has turned or the direction and the speed has changed so radically all of a sudden would also be a great
Yeah.
warning system to have, right?
And internally at the Santa Rosa Fire Department, they invested in like remote weather stations, RAWS stations.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
They have placed those strategically throughout the city of Santa Rosa. And then the IT department within the city built, um, in essence, like an online app that monitors all of this raw data coming in and makes predictions on, fire severity and danger.
Hmm.
Um,
That's
they
great.
have changed how they look at wildland fire, at least speaking about Santa Rosa Fire Department. So we've completely changed how we look at wildland fire, how we respond to wildland fire. We've invested in preparing for that next wildland fire. Um,
Yeah. Would you say that Santa Rosa is on the cutting edge of doing this, that using that sort of technology?
I would like to think so. I'm sure there's other places out there that are doing great things as well. We've invested in drone technology and those remote weather stations. We've purchased multiple wildland firefighting vehicles. That was one of the big things we found on the night of the Tubbs fires. We had a lot of firefighters that came back in off duty, but we didn't have vehicles to stick them in. We've invested in better communication technology. We've better prepared just the everyday city employee to be able to come back in and run the city in more of like a disaster mode. And all
Yeah.
that came about, it's unfortunate it wasn't done before the Tubbs fire, but it came about because of the Tubbs fire. Like I was saying earlier, the Sonoma County in general, prior to this, was never impacted by fires like this. In my lifetime, there had never been a fire that burned down hundreds of homes or even thousands of homes.
Hmm.
It was typical that maybe you would get a 20, 30 acre grass fire, and maybe that grass fire would burn down one house, right? But the fire department was very good at responding to those types of fires.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Tubbs fire occurred, and since then we've had, I think, 3 or 4 other wildland fire years that have impacted communities here in Sonoma County, and the city of Santa Rosa. The glass fire, I think 2 years later, burned into parts of Santa Rosa and burned homes down, but it was dramatically different how we responded to that and how, the outcome of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Glass fire is an interesting one to compare to it, for
Yeah.
sure. It was during that 2020 fire season when there were so many lightning strikes across,
Yeah.
and many lightning complex fires came together to overwhelm anybody's Cal Fire's capabilities of keeping
Yeah.
up with these complex fires. But do you recall during the Glass Fire or the Hennessy Fire whether there were the kind of winds that you saw during the Tubbs Fire?
No, and so that is the biggest difference, right? While the glass fire was still a red flag, condition, the winds just were nowhere near the Tubbs fire.
Hmm.
Uh, and I've never seen the winds like that again since the Tubbs fire. Um, and so
Yeah,
that it's just crazy to me how windy it was that evening, how scary it was because of how windy it was.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Well, I think that you've given me another inspiration here or idea. Maybe I can find a meteorologist out there who might be able to tell us what was it about that day, that night, and that those weather conditions that caused those kind of winds. Um, what are the chances, of it repeating itself?
yeah,
Given the fact that our climate seems to be getting warmer and drier all the time,
yeah,
and these Diablo winds are can be as devastating as Santa Ana winds in the
yeah.
south, and as unpredictable. So need to find a meteorologist who understands all this, right? Because that's really the big question is how often could this happen again?
Yeah, there's got to be someone. Like I said, I mean, a lot of that stuff is definitely above my head. I'm just
Me
a
too.
firefighter, right? um, but there's got to be someone that studied that. There's got to be someone that knows exactly what occurred that evening that brought those winds on. Like, why was there a perfect alignment that created the wind event during the Tubbs fire? And is there warnings to that in the future? Is there a way to predict that accurately and to prepare the community accurately for that in the future?
Yeah, because if those winds had really started kicking up much farther to the east, say in Yolo County
Yeah,
or even Sacramento County, um, or up into the foothills, then that might be where you'd want to have a lot of sensors as well. You get more time, like you said, it'd be
yeah,
more like a hurricane prediction rather than a tornado warning.
yeah.
So, but understanding because it's a very large regional phenomenon, isn't it? These Diablo winds.
Oh yes, and it is, from my view of them right over my career, it is very hard to pinpoint exactly where they are going to, manifest themselves. Because we get red flag warnings here all the time, and I'm sure that there is more that goes into a red flag warning than just right, but events here all the time throughout the summer, and especially late summer, early fall, right? Um, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly where they're going to pop up, exactly how fast they're going to be, what they're going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what caught us off guard, is that we just never thought that we could truly get winds that fast here, because no one had ever seen it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're in a new world of
Yeah,
extreme weather. There's no doubt.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, um, Matt, Captain Tognozzi, thank you so much today for sharing these, amazing insights and knowledge with the listeners of the podcast. Um, I think we're about at the normal time that we'd have for this. And I just wanted to, reiterate that this recording was, and ones like it are being made on the podcast to document, for all time, hopefully, some of these very important wildfire impacts and lessons that we've learned in these urban zones of California before that knowledge is lost, from the collective memory of those who were there to experience them, and like yourself. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And
Thank you, Dr. Potter.
sure thing. And I wish you and all your firefighters the utmost safety and success in all future incidents, which you're called, of course.
Yes,
Yeah, there will be future incidents, but
of
we
course.
we hope that we'll be able to see something like the Tubbs winds coming at us well in advance this time or next
Yes.
time, and get people out of the way, as you said, because they're our most precious resource to protect, right? So
Yeah.
thank you so much again, Captain Tognozzi, and listeners. That wraps up another episode of When Wildfire Comes. So tell your friends about us and check back regularly for new additional episodes. Goodbye and be fire safe. Thanks.